Hello, this is psychologist Yulia Latunenko, and today I have prepared an interesting topic for you: how not to attract narcissists. A lot of people, me clients and YouTube viewers, ask me like, how can I change myself? What do I need to do so that I never end up in a relationship with narcissistic individuals again? And today I will share with you a few points that you need to learn and apply to work on yourself so that you no longer end up in toxic relationships. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so, and don't forget to like this video if you find it helpful. And also don't forget that any of your comments longer than 7 words help promote my channel on YouTube. So how can you avoid getting involved with or attracting narcissists? And the first thing I want to point out is that only codependent people end up in relationships with narcissists. In other words, these are people who have not yet cut, metaphorically speaking, the psychological umbilical cord that connects them to their own childhood, that is, to the significant adults who raised them and unfortunately traumatized them. So codependency is essentially a disruption in a child's development. These are childhood traumas that a person may not even be aware of and may not know why. Why are these narcissists so drawn to me? Why do I keep running into the same problem over and over again? So if you have had relationships with narcissistic people in your life, it is only a consequence of what happened to you in childhood. The second thing I want to point out here, you need to establish your own psychological and physical boundaries. You need to be able to define them. You need to be able to talk about them. But first, you actually need to be aware of them, to know what they are. Where do those boundaries lie? Where is that line that others are not allowed to cross? And the third point follows from the second. What I suggest you do to become aware of your own boundaries is to create a kind of blacklist. This is a list of actions that you consider unacceptable towards you. In other words, these are things that no one should ever do to you under any circumstances. Write out such a blacklist. So this is a list of red flags that are unacceptable in relationships with anyone, even with your parents. In other words, this blacklist applies not only to the men or women you are trying to build relationships with. First and foremost, it concerns your parents. So if you walk through your boundaries with your own parents, if you learn to say no and stop to them without feeling guilty, then everything will be fine for you in interpersonal relationships. And so we smoothly move on to the fourth point. This is separation from your parents. Many people say, oh, I've been separated from my parents for a long time. I live on my own. Since I was 16, I've been earning my own money. I live in a different city, even in a different country. And sometimes it even happens that the parents have long since passed away. But that doesn't mean you're psychologically separated from your parents. You can check this by how easily you can say no to people, how unafraid you are to build close relationships, for example, or how much you feel fear of being alone. And so the fifth point is to learn to be happy, regardless of whether someone is by your side or not. Learn to accept your loneliness, not to be afraid of it. Be able to be happy in solitude. Because as psychologists say, people who are afraid of being alone are actually contraindicated from having partnerships or close relationships. The sixth thing you need to do is learn to notice the details in a person's behavior. Because as we all know, the devil is in the details. That is, learn to spot those subtle signs of toxicity in a person, be able to analyze someone's behavior, and of course, analyze your own behavior as well. Because many people say, oh, I want to understand what a narcissist is, what a narcissistic person is like, how they actually behave. I want to understand this person. But we forget that first and foremost, we need to learn to understand ourselves and to be very attentive to the details of our own behavior, to the details of our reactions, our emotions, and our needs. However, understanding the behavior of a narcissistic person certainly won't hurt anyone either. So, what do you need to learn to do next? To be in touch with yourself, to be in touch with your inner self and your feelings. Even to be in touch with your intuition. When you notice certain details, you start making excuses for the person. You start ignoring some red flags because you need to take time to analyze the person's behavior. But how can you do that when the relationship develops very quickly? When after just 2 months, they're already living together, when they've already had sexual contact on the first date and their hormones are running wild, there's a surge of hormones. And honestly, after that, we stop being clear-headed and stop objectively evaluating ourselves and our partner. So don't rush into this. Try to maintain critical thinking and don't rush into relationships, because the first sign of a pathological relationship is that it develops very quickly. The next thing I suggest you do is learn to trust your own feelings. If you doubt whether your feelings are valid, it creates a perfect foundation for a narcissistic person to gaslight you. That is, narcissistic people very often say, that never happened. You imagined it all. You misunderstood everything. You feeling things the wrong way. And so the victim of a narcissistic person starts to doubt, are my feelings even valid? Remember, no matter what they're like, that very first moment when you feel some tension, if you feel any pain, try to understand what that feeling is and trust what you feel. The ninth point in my recommendations, never take on the role of the victim. Try to be highly resistant to it. That is to say, to actively push back against the manipulative and narcissistic individual who is relentlessly trying to force you into that vulnerable and undesirable position. Don't be a victim. And to do that, you simply need to learn to say no and stop, and not be afraid to lose this relationship or to offend this person. Because if you don't honestly say no and stop, you'll never truly learn to say yes to people. And the last 10th point in my recommendations is to pay attention to the overall picture of how your relationship with a person develops from the very beginning. If everything seems too perfect and you are swept up in this idealization of your partner, honestly, that should make you wary. Because what a narcissist does from the very beginning is try to pull you into a shared fantasy. He meticulously crafts and cultivates this elaborate and shared fantasy, a deeply ingrained illusion, which suggests and reinforces the notion that he is the sole individual capable of bringing you true happiness and fulfillment in your life. And he or she, narcissistic person, promises you a lot. How wonderful your future together will be, what he will do for you, what he will eventually buy you, how happy you will be, and you relax and start projecting a parental figure onto the narcissistic person. Because what a narcissistic person offers at the beginning of a relationship is precisely the role of a father or mother. You take the bait and enter into this shared fantasy, merging with the narcissist, and he only adds fuel to the fire, saying, we were made for each other. We are twin souls. Only I can make you happy. I'm the only one in the world who's truly right for you. Please, don't believe all of this at the beginning of a relationship. It's an illusion, a narcissistic illusion. This is the shared fantasy that the narcissist creates, and for a codependent person, it is always a trap. And don't forget, subscribing to my channel is very important for promoting my content on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment with more than 7 words, because unfortunately YouTube doesn't count short comments. So I'll see you again in my next episode.